It's really nice to have a chance to be on and to see some names that I recognize and hear some voices that I recognize. With COVID, it's hopefully we'll be able to start traveling again soon. As Bernard said, we're using Teams. Just as a word of warning, everybody's microphone is live and everybody's camera is live. So we ask that you stay on mute because everybody will hear it. And we have the chat, which Bernard covered. We also have the raised hand icon. For those of you who are familiar with Teams, it's just a smiley face with the hand at the top bar right over here. And we definitely will take questions verbally as well if you'd like to ask, or if you want to, make a comment, that's welcome too. So today, we're going to be covering 3 topics, as Bernard said: the new 602 launch, TrueSW 602, and some great enhancements to our new TrueSite Workstation solution. Again, Paul is the product manager for this product line, and he is the one that's brought this, this program forward. So he's going to take us through it, and of course is the technical expert who can answer questions about the product. And then we're going to switch gears, and Roger's going to come on and talk about the code updates for the new thing called the BSIU. The BSIU is a new flavor of management console. That's a big change in the codes, and I think will be really something that will help spur sales in the region and also help make a TSW and a graphical console much more affordable option for more people. So again, I think this is a really great change in the codes. And then after we tell you why the codes are changed, Paul's going to come back on and tell you exactly what the BSIU is in terms of the product and how you get it, and the ins and outs of it. And then finally, I'll come back on the end here and just have a quick 1-slide overview of the marketing materials that are available. We published a whole slew of materials and brochures and collateral to help you present and sell the product. And I want to make sure that you're aware of all that. And then we'll have a QA at the end. We expect, based on experience, that the content's going to take maybe 50 minutes, maybe a little less than an hour. So we should have, plenty of time for Q&A, and we can stay on as late as we need to make sure that we've handled all the questions we can. So with that, we'll switch over to the next. I don't know why it keeps doing this. This is very strange to me. We'll switch on to the next slide and introduce Paul Nelson.
All right, thank you for the introduction, Peter, and thank you everyone for having us. So we're excited to introduce some of the new features for the TrueSite Workstation in version 6.02. And moving forward, our goal is to have a significant launch of new features for the TrueSite Workstation each and every year. So this year is especially impactful, though, and without further ado, we'll get into what some of the new features are in the next slide. So as an overall summary, one of the biggest differences you'll recognize in version 6.02 is that the graphics look much nicer. We're introducing support for the 3-dimensional style of graphics that you may have seen before in the Metasys user interface. They're very attractive and very easy for an operator to understand. So you'll see that visually the screens are much more appealing and easier to read. We've also made editing those screens easier as well. We've updated the compatibility for an important feature that we'll talk a little bit about, the DACR feature. DACR stands for Digital Alarm Communicator Receiver, and we'll talk about just why that feature is so important. We've also taken care of some of the functionality with the remote clients and how they behave to make that smarter and to make that more smooth for the end user. You'll also notice too this year with the recent version of TSW, we've transitioned from the hardware dongle for licensing support to a software. So the licenses are now hosted in the cloud, and we've gotten rid of those USB dongles. We've also added some support for additional languages in the runtime of the program, We now support French, Spanish, Portuguese, and Arabic languages in runtime. And then, as Peter introduced, we'll talk a lot about the Building Systems Information Unit, or the BSIU. And Roger Reiswig is going to help us understand from a code perspective exactly what that is. And then we'll talk at the end of the program about the product solution that we've brought to market for that. So the next slide, Peter. So here we see our updated three-dimensional graphics. Not only do these look really good, they appeal to the eye, but they also help an operator to understand the layout of the floor plan much better. And we also offer the ability for them to turn on only the information that they need to see. So these, as you can see in the example on the screen, these floor plans are very clean and very simple to understand. So the new programming tools that we've introduced will also save the technician time. Every year we listen to what technicians have to say, what features they would like to see to make their job easier. And one of the important features that we've implemented this year is an undo button for the graphics. Previously, this may seem like a simple feature, but previously if a technician made a mistake in setting up a graphic screen, it required a significant amount of rework or additional programming to overcome that mistake. So we've implemented that feature, we've expanded the compatibility with different graphics files, and we've also improved the way that the icons operate in an alarm condition. Next slide, Peter. So now let's talk about the DACR feature. This is one of the premium features of the TrueSite Workstation. And again, that stands for Digital Alarm Communicator Receiver. So the DACR acts as the receiving end of the digital alarm communicator in a fire alarm panel. Now, why is this feature so important? This feature actually allows us to receive information from any fire alarm system that communicates in one of the standard digital alarm communicator protocols. You may be familiar with a DEMCO contact ID or SIA, SIA2. These standard protocols are spoken by nearly every manufacturer, at least every manufacturer of UL 864 listed fire alarm systems. So I often get the question from customers of, if I have a campus or a customer that has multiple manufacturers on the same site or on distributed sites, how can I communicate to all of those fire alarm panels that may not be Simplex fire alarm panels? And this is the easiest and many times the best solution. So using those digital alarm communicators in each of those control panels, regardless of who the manufacturer is, we can take detailed alarm and event information into the TrueSite Workstation, and we can use that information to plot points on the graphics, to execute control operations, and to really pull all of that information into that one workstation. It is important to note, though, that because of the nature of this communication, it is in one direction. So if you have one building communicating to the TrueSite Workstation through the digital alarm communicator, the TrueSite Workstation can see all of those events, but it cannot exercise control over that system. So in other words, the TSW would not be capable of silencing or resetting those alarms at that remote building. So the enhancements that we've made this year are we've added some of the latest digital alarm communicator receivers on the market to our list of compatible receivers. So you have the SureGuard System 5 receiver, which is the one that I would personally recommend. And in the case that you need wireless operation, the AES IntelliNet receiver is also compatible. and that utilizes long-range radio transmission. So both of these are excellent choices, and that's why we've added them to this year's release of TSW. So the next slide. So on larger systems that require a primary and a secondary or a backup TrueSite Workstation server, the behavior of clients has had some issues in the past. For instance, when a remote client would transfer its connection from the primary to the secondary TrueSite Workstation server, that would always cause a trouble condition. While that may not be a big deal, if that transition happens often, that trouble can be a nuisance to the end user. So we have made that connection and that transfer of connection smarter so that it does not need to result in a trouble condition. Another instance where a trouble condition would happen is when a TrueSite Workstation client needed to go through a rebuild process. Well, it would, in that process, disconnect from the server, and then it would reconnect to the server. And every time that would happen, it would cause a trouble condition, and that slot that the remote connection attached to would have to be reselected. So we've, again, made that smarter. So that reconnection to the server is automatic and does not result in that nuisance trouble condition. So overall, we've really improved the operation of remote clients. Let's move to the next slide, Peter. So it seems like a lot is new this year, and really there is a lot that is new, and we've delivered value to all three of the personas that you see here. For salespeople, if you're selling the TSW, the product looks great. These improved graphics are much easier to sell. Customers are excited about the three-dimensional look and the improved functionality of the graphics. And we can, as always, with the TrueSite Workstation, with the premium features, we can sell only what the customer needs. And we can also increase our margins, which is very important to all of us, through lower programming costs. Remember that we're always improving things behind the scenes for the technicians as well. So the technicians are of course excited about this, and technicians always want to see us update. So with these new features that we see, that's not all that version 6.02 offers us. Remember that it also offers us compatibility with the latest versions of Windows, with the latest antivirus software. The customer will be the most up to date in their cybersecurity. So keeping up to date and making sure that our customers are upgrading to the latest version is very important. For the customers, they want the good-looking, easy-to-use graphics. They want the up-to-date software, and they really want to be kept up to date with the latest technology. So especially if you think of your existing customers with TrueSite Workstation, if any of them are still, for instance, still on Windows 95 machines, now is an especially good time for them to upgrade, because not only has Windows dropped support for that operating system or the Windows, the previous versions of Windows, but we have these powerful new features as well. So those are the primary features of version 6.02. We're going to, of course, save the best for last, but in the meantime, we're going to turn things over to Roger Reiswig, and he's going to talk to us about the new provisions in the code for the BSIU.
Thank you, Paul, and appreciate that. I'm going to turn my camera on just for a second just to say hi to everybody, and see a lot of familiar names out there, and hopefully we'll be able to see everyone in person here real soon. But I'll go ahead and save a little bit of bandwidth since kids are home from school and work, and we don't have the strongest bandwidth right now. So in the industry, in NFPA world, there's a new application, I guess we could call it, called BSIU, for Building System Information Unit. And NFPA has worked a lot to try to allow this application to occur. And some of the things that have caused this, or have been the reason to create a separate application of a graphics package, has been technologies and the advancements that are happening in other industries that kind of touch into the fire alarm world. Whether it's HVAC, security, what have you, and how they operate. And these building operators, they're expecting the integration with these systems to happen. They're expecting to have an app or some way to communicate, interact with these systems, get status updates, service requests, or what have you. And along with that, our first responders, whether it's firefighters, emergency personnel, they also are using this technology in their own world, having the interface with their breathing apparatus, with the fire trucks, fire apparatuses that they have. Some cases, they're even using remote control to activate extinguishers or water jets or water cannons, and doing it all with a little joystick, kind of like almost like a game type of a feel to it. So they're looking for integration into these systems, and life safety systems want to do this as well, but there's always been the cautious approach from NFPA, from UL, about making sure the reliability, survivability is there, because it's a fire alarm system, and it needs to operate all the time. And up until now, we, in the manufacturing world, we've had to use homegrown equipment, if you will. When I go to UL and I get a product listed, they list everything about that product. So when I get the TSW that Paul's talking about, when I get that listed at UL, they will take and list the hard drive, the memory, the monitor, the keyboard, everything that I use, and it becomes part of the listing. If my vendor for Johnson Controls comes to me and says, hey, those hard drives I was selling you, I now can give you a hard drive that's twice as fast, holds twice as much memory for half the price, I can't just arbitrarily go ahead and change that out. I have to go back to UL and get them to approve it. But I say all of this because this is very expensive for a manufacturer to do. This is why the TSWs, the graphics packages that we all sell in the industry, have been a very expensive way to go. But they're UL listed for fire, they're proven, they're reliable, and they have the performance that's needed. And in the fire world, it's UL 864 for fire alarm control units and their accessories. So as we move on, Pete, to our next slide, NFPA looked at this and said, okay, we really need to come up with some way that can allow for off-the-shelf technology, if you will, where I don't have to go to UL and get them to somebody commute.
Hello, can guest mute? Justin, can we mute all and then?
All right, very good. Thank you, Jesselyn, Bernard. So NFPA, was working on this, and they said, okay, if we're going to do this, let's come up with a way that we can allow off-the-shelf technology to be utilized, but not compromise life safety. So one of the first things that they did was they created a new definition. So this is, I call it brand new because it just came out for 2019 edition of the code. And in chapter 3, which is where all the definitions are, a new definition in 3.34 was added for BSIU, Building System Information Unit. And as you read that, it's a computer-based electronic device that's intended to display building information. And here's the big one: execute system control functions, including fire system information display and control. in the fire alarm world, we've always said the fire alarm is a one-way box. You can send information out of the fire alarm, but you can't bring information into the fire alarm. And this is how we've been able to go to third-party printers or CRTs or monitors, things like that, but you couldn't have anything come into it. So now this is setting up in the definition that's going to allow the fire alarm to be controlled by a third entity, a different part that's not a quote-unquote fire alarm piece of equipment. So now we got the definition laid out in the code. If we go to the next slide, Peter, we have to start talking about the hardware. And this has been the stickling point, the hard point for many, many years, for decades actually. And they said, okay, this is the problem that people have had. I have to use the very expensive computer, how it gets listed and all of that I just went over with you. They said, well, what if, NFPA said, what if we allow the use of some other type of a UL listed computer that's not fire alarm rated, but still is pretty hardened or pretty reliable, that we can allow that to be utilized? So two listings met that category or that criteria. Well, one was 60950 for IT or information technology equipment, and the other one is 62368 Part 1 for audio video information and communication technology equipment. And the big deal about this is a UL 6950 computer is something that I can readily buy off the shelf from Amazon or other hardware suppliers that are out there. And it doesn't have to be listed for fire. It can just be listed to that UL 6950. And it's a lot more economical. It's much cheaper to buy a computer like this than one that is listed for fire. So now we've got the hardware kind of figured out. And if we go to the next slide, Peter, and then we start to look at, okay, well, if we're going to implement this, we're going to allow you to have some type of a graphics package that's not only going to allow you to see what's going on at the fire alarm, but also to allow you to control what happens. Then we need to make sure we have some roadblocks, safety gates, things that are there, so we still want to still maintain that reliability, survivability of the system. So where a BSIU, that's what this new package is called or designated, provides control of the fire alarm system, the requirements in Chapter 23, which is our protected premises chapter, Section 84221 through 84224 need to apply. And those are, Peter, next slide, please. And those are a fire alarm control unit controlling the fire alarm shall be located within the same room as the BSIU. So the graphic there that you see, where we have the monitor sitting there at the desk, I have to have a fire alarm in that same room, because the concern always has been, well, what if the hardware, the computer locks up, the software locks up, the computer goes down, I've lost all my interaction with the system. So NFPA has said, if you're going to do this, then whatever control function that you're doing at the BSIU, if it does fail, you have to be able to get up, walk over to the other fire alarm in that room and do that exact same functionality. And that's a big point, because I've heard people say, well, I got a fire alarm in there, so this BSIU now can do everything. Well, that's not true. And for example, with a 4100 ES, it can communicate to several hundred other 4100s out there with other TSWs. But if I have 50 4100 ESs out there on a network, one 4100 ES cannot see and control everything on the network. It's just not designed, and it doesn't have the power to do that. So that's my limitation. When I put that fire alarm on the wall, whatever that fire alarm is able to do, that's what I'm able to do with that BSIU. So that's the caveat. That's where people say, well, why wouldn't I just use this and never use a TSW ever again? Well, a TSW can do hundreds of thousands of points, and it can control everything, and it's all hardware the hardware is listed for fire alarm use. So this is kind of like the little sister or a mid-range option for some customers. And then the BSIU shall not be permitted to perform fire alarm system control features that cannot be accomplished at the control unit in the same room. So whatever you're doing sitting at the desk, you got to be able to do at the fire alarm at the wall. Next slide, Peter. So, and then along with that, the communications, how we get from this BSIU UL 6950 computer to the fire alarm network is governed also by Chapter 23. So the communications path from the fire alarm to the BSIU needs to meet the requirements in Chapter 23, 8441 through 8443. So all the equipment and pathways need to meet the monitoring for integrity requirements. So I got to be able to monitor for open, shorts, grounds, if I'm going to do Class A, Class B, and what have you. And all the equipment and pathways shall be maintained by a single service organization, meaning this is not supposed to be where I go in, it's a computer, and the customer says, well, it's a computer, I'll just put it on the network, and I'll drop a LAN port into the 4100 and allow it to communicate that way. No, you can't do that. So if it's a Simplex piece of equipment that's out there, the Simplex organization needs to be the one that is doing the communications and the pathways to it, like 4100 ES or ESNet or the old 4120 communications, whatever you want to refer to it as. And all the equipment and pathways need to be in accordance with the code, and the equipment all needs to be listed. So the hardware, the communications hardware, needs to be listed for fire. Next slide, Peter. And then, so the software needs to be listed for fire alarm use to UL 864. And you might be sitting there thinking, well, gee, Roger, this has been out since 2019. Why haven't I seen this from Simplex or any manufacturer? And you're just talking about it now. And here we are in what, June of 2021, you know, two and a half years later. Well, the problem was Underwriters Laboratory, where we go to get our products listed, UL 864 only allowed for a computer to be listed with hardware and software as a package. There was no way for me to go to UL and get my software only listed. So UL 864 had to change. It had to go out to ballot and finally was able to be released. And that was just a few months ago when that happened, that UL changed. So even though this went into effect in 72 in 2019, it didn't go into effect in UL 864 until March of 2021. So now I'm able, and we at Simplex, you know, hats off to Paul and the team, we at Simplex were ready to go. And as soon as UL added the change into the document, we went to them and said, here's our product, let's get it listed, which is why you're hearing about Simplex having this, because I believe we're one of the first ones to market with this type of an application. And then I also have one here that products can be UL listed, and you're starting to see other products in the marketplace from Simplex and the industry that are being listed by Intertek ETL. UL has the standard, or they're the repository, the place that holds all of the UL standards on how you test something, but it doesn't mean I have to go to UL to get it listed. So UL has two entities. UL has a not-for-profit side that takes care of all the standards. They're ANSI accredited and how they do all of that. And then UL has a for-profit side that then goes and says, hey, Simplex, you want to get that product listed to the UL 864 document? I'll be glad to do it, and here's my price to make that happen. You know, there's many other recognized testing laboratories that are able to do this. Probably the second biggest one out there is ETL Intertek. And I just wanted to bring it up because you're probably starting to see the ETL logo on some products from Simplex and in the industry and other facets. And it's perfectly fine. UL is okay, or NFPA is okay with that. They just asked for it to be listed by a certification body. It doesn't have to be UL listed, but it has to be the UL document. Hope I didn't confuse that more. So now the software is able to be split apart from the hardware, and we can get it listed separately, which is what we've done. So now our offering does meet all the requirements of UL 864 as well as NFPA 72. So I hope that kind of clears up, the BSIU and what's going on with it. And I'll be glad to have answer any questions later on. But I think this was the last slide I had.
And thank you for that, Roger, because that really sets a nice stage for the product offering that we've developed according to these new code allowances. So as Roger mentioned, we are one of the first to come to market with a BSIU, or Building Systems Information Unit solution. So we're very excited about that, and we really have the competitive advantage because of being first to market. So with the BSIU, as Roger stated, the biggest difference that you'll see is that we've gotten rid of the requirement for the UL 864 listed computer hardware. And that's very, very important because the bulk of the cost of implementing a TrueSite workstation lies in that listed hardware. So by getting rid of that, we have a much more cost competitive solution. And to let you know what our thinking was when we developed the BSIU product, we decided right from the start that we wanted to offer the most feature-rich BSIU product possible. So because of some of the limitations of the code applications that Roger covered, not every option that is available on the TrueSite workstation can be offered on the BSIU. But our goal was to offer as many of those features as possible. So we'll talk in a little more detail about what is possible and what is not with the BSIU. So also, as Roger discussed, the exciting thing with the BSIU is that it offers control of the fire alarm system, much like the TSW does. So you'll see a lot of similarities, but we'll cover some of the differences as well. So the BSIU is part of the TrueSite family, and it's very closely related to the TrueSite workstation, and it will be available with each release of TrueSite software, beginning with this year's release, 6.02. And it's the software itself, as Roger helped us to understand, that carries the UL listing. So the UL listing is shown on the screen here. It's actually UL listed under a new category within UL 864. And the listing is very similar to the listing that an annunciator would carry, which is what allows it to have control over the system. And again, we can't stress this enough, that because of the ability to run on low cost computer hardware, it's very, very competitive in the marketplace. In fact, many people, when they provide the BSIU software to a customer, will allow the customer's IT department to supply the computer equipment. And of course, the customer's IT department is very comfortable in doing that. Many times in selling a TSW, it's a challenge to get the customer's IT department to allow our hardware to be introduced with the TrueSite workstation. So this part of the customer acceptance is much, much easier. So let's move to the next slide. And Roger really covered this very well and very thoroughly. But again, we'll stress that the computer hardware does not need to meet the UL 864 requirement, but Roger also mentioned a couple of other UL standards that it does need to meet. So he discussed the UL 60950 and 62368-1. And when many people hear that, they assume that we're just trading one UL standard for another. And while that is true, the UL standards that are listed here are very, very common standards. And you'll find that most commercially available PCs will meet these requirements. In fact, I like to mention when we talk to folks about this, that my company provided laptop just so happens to meet these requirements. So most PCs that are manufactured by the larger manufacturers, such as Dell or Hewlett Packard and so forth, you'll find that they will meet these standards without any issues. So although we need to confirm this, it is not a difficult standard to comply with. So let's move to the next slide. So let's talk about how and when the BSIU can be used. As Roger spoke of, the BSIU has to be co-located or located in the same room as the fire alarm control unit. But this is not as large a limitation as it first seems. Because remember, that fire alarm control unit, although it needs to be able to perform all of the functions possible on the BSIU, it does not need to be a simple control unit. In fact, if we used a network display unit as our fire alarm control unit, now we're allowed to use the BSIU even on a somewhat larger network, up to 12,000 points, which is not a small system anymore. But we need to remember that guiding principle. Remember that everything that's done to control the system from the building systems information unit, those same critical functions need to be possible from the fire alarm control unit. And the reason for that is easy to understand. If we recall that this BSIU software is running on hardware that's not fire alarm listed. So if that hardware was to fail, and we've all experienced a computer freezing or locking up or needing to be rebooted. If that were to happen during a critical emergency, the operator needs to be able to stand up and walk over to the fire alarm control panel and operate the system from there. So if we think about that, it's easy to understand why some features are not available. For instance, the DACR function that we talked about, because that information would flow through the computer or through the BSIU, in that case, that function was not allowed, because if the BSIU was not available because of a hardware failure, then we would lose that function. Similarly, remote clients are not allowed for the same reason, because the information would flow from the remote client and through the BSIU computer. So again, making it a critical part of that system. So that's the main principle behind what features were allowed and which were not allowed. So you'll find that the majority of the features of the TrueSite Workstation, the graphics, the control capability, all of the really nice reporting features in the TrueSite Workstation, those are all there in a UL listed environment, as long as that fire alarm control unit is in the same room. So let's look at the next slide. So the BSIU software is available today. Our UL listing is complete, and we are currently shipping the BSIU software. So the part number is the 4190-8408. Now, it's inevitable that we will be asked for a recommendation for the computer that the BSIU should run on, and we're happy to give that recommendation. The specifications that you see here, this Dell Optiplex computer with the other specifications on the screen, the reason we can confidently recommend this PC is that this is the exact PC that was used in our software quality assurance testing. So if a customer were to ask for a recommendation, please use this recommendation, which will give us the greatest confidence in compatibility. Next slide. So this is, again, it's a very exciting offering. It's a brand new provision in the code. We're one of the first to market. Let's look at the value of the BSIU. Again, the most important value that it presents is the lower cost. Again, it's the same value proposition, we're making the fire alarm system easier to use. We're giving the operator of the system those nice graphics, the nice reporting functions, the ability to enable and disable points and control the system from the convenience of a computer console. So think of all of the installations you have in your current customer base. Think of all of the customers that you would like to see have a TrueSite workstation, but it was just beyond their reach because of their budget. This will appeal to a much broader audience because it's very accessible from a cost perspective. So as a result, we've increased our console market size. We've priced the BSIU very competitively because we believe that it will be adopted by many, many customers. So as a result, those that use the BSIU will see better safety. Their operators will be more efficient. Their operators will be easier to train as well. Roger has a very interesting podcast out there that talks about the BSIU as a tool for just that, for making fire alarm systems easy to use. So that's an important reason to promote this product. And we've talked about the reporting capabilities. Those are very powerful. The True Alert reports, the Almost Dirty reports. There's so many powerful tools within the TrueSite software. And again, this is an upsell opportunity. Look at your existing customers, those who would benefit from the TrueSite workstation type of software, and revisit them and let them know that the BSIU is on the market now. So again, we're very excited about this. I'm glad Roger was here to explain to us how this is possible, and we're excited to be one of the first to bring a product to meet this new market opportunity. So next slide, Peter. And with that, we'll turn things back over to Peter Ryan, and he'll talk about our marketing asset updates.
Excellent. Thank you, Paul and Roger, for those for the updates and for going through those new products. Yeah, I think, I'll just add my 2 cents again to it here, is I think this is a really great addition to the line. I don't know why my computer keeps switching out. It's very interesting. I think it's a great addition to the line because I'll use an example here in the US with the educational market. You'll have an installation like a university, a college, a campus with multiple buildings, and it's a clear-cut case for the TSW. And you've got multiple panels, multiple buildings. It makes good sense. But when you get down into something like a single building grammar school or a high school, you don't have the case to put in a full-blown TSW, and you typically have that fire alarm panel, the control unit, in the, say, the front office of the, where the reception area is. And they would benefit from getting that reporting and having a nice graphical screen and having something much easier to use than the panel. But they can't, you can't afford it on a system of that size. And also, there's really not much call to burden the system with the cost of a full TSW. So this gives a small single building customer a chance to use this technology. And I think looking at the marketplace, there's a lot of opportunity for those type of installations, as opposed to these massive campus environments that that you normally throw a TSW at. So that's, again, my 2 cents. So the question from the marketing standpoint that I wanted to just go through is, so we've told you about these great products, but how do you educate your customers about them, and how do you, what assets do we have to help you do marketing? And I've listed the biggest things that we've done here on the screen so far. We've updated, of course, the networking and workstation brochure. This is the one that we had before with, the earlier versions with ESNet and TSW. We've updated the ESNet section to include the synchronization and the notification appliance synchronization. And now we've added pages on the BSIU and the TSW entire family. So it explains all of it, and that's brand new. And we've also put out an infographic of some of the pages of which you saw during this presentation tonight. So the idea of the infographic is to give you a visual that shows the TSW and the BSIU and helps customers and you have a better handle on what is available in the TSW family, the clients, the servers, the mobile clients, the campus environment that it fits in, and then how a BSIU would be used and how that fits. So it's a very good graphical way to see that. We did a press release announcing this, and as Paul said, I think, well, I shouldn't say I think, we are the only the second provider, the second manufacturer to release to do a BSIU, to get it through UL, and we are the only one talking about it publicly. So we're not at this point sure that the other manufacturer even has it on the market yet. So so you have an open opportunity here with the BSIU to talk about something that no one else can do. And that's, you know, a huge advantage. And with the cost savings, again, there's a lot to like here. Now we do white papers. Hopefully you've been using these. We post these all on the website, and the idea of the white paper about different topics is that it's not a brochure, it's not a piece of sales collateral that's pushing a particular brand or product. What we're doing is essentially content marketing, where we're putting together educational materials that of course you and your teams can use, but you also can give to your customers, where you're giving them a piece of collateral that's educating them about something that's critical to them. And it's a resource, it's a thing that you're using to bring benefit to them without it coming across like we're basically trying to, you know, to sell them something. So the white papers, we've done these again on many topics, and this latest one on the BSIU is a 2-pager explaining, you know, a lot of what we talked about tonight, which is like, what is a BSIU? I think Roger and Paul can both vouch for the fact that this is not only is this new, even though it was done in 2019, but like the vast majority of people that we talk to in the market, including our sales force here in the United States and other regions, Latin America and the Middle East, don't know what this is. They're unaware of it. They're unaware of the code changes, and they're unaware that there's a solution other than a full-blown graphical management console. So the idea is these materials are going to help you educate them and get them comfortable with the BSIU. And then hopefully you can sell it to them and make revenue, generate revenue, where you presumably before couldn't have sold a TSW, or a TSW would have been overkill. We are doing a video on the TSW. This, in my opinion, is long overdue. We have gone forever without a TSW video. And now that we have the BSIU, we're doing one that's going to encompass the whole family, and the scripts and so forth are done. So we expect to have this wrapped up. You know, I say you can look for this toward the end of July, so that'll be coming shortly. I saved the podcast that Paul mentioned for the end, because I really want to do a plug for this. This is a whole series of podcasts that we did called the Industry Roundtable with Roger Reiswig. And we just published the 8th episode of this today. And what this is Roger, again, it's not a product commercial. It's a podcast on a topic that an engineer, an architect, a system designer, a salesperson, a building owner, a building facility manager would benefit from hearing, technology, codes, you know, what have you. So we just did one of these on CO detection, and that was the one that was just released actually about 4 o'clock this afternoon, my time, where Roger speaks with Art Black, who's an industry expert on carbon monoxide. You know, what is it? Why is it dangerous? How do you detect it? What are the rules and the codes, etc.? And then before that, as Paul mentioned, Paul and Roger did a great podcast. I really thought it came out well on the BSIU. So you can go through there. There's performance-based design. There's smoke control. There's all sorts of good things. As of last month, we've gotten the podcast on Spotify. We got it on iTunes, so you can subscribe to it on both of those platforms, and you know, get it on your mobile devices, which makes it 1,000,000% easier to access. So listen, share, educate your customers about it, and subscribe to it. And if you have any topics that you want to hear covered, like the DACR or something like that, drop me or Roger a line, and we'll put it on the list, because we're always looking to do episodes on things that will help you explain things to your customers, or will help explain things to you and your team, so that you can be more effective in the market. Okay, so that's the plug that I wanted to give about the marketing assets available, and that's the formal presentation, just about an hour here. So let's open it up for questions, and let's take a look at what we have. So Paul, I hadn't had a chance to really dig into the questions yet, so I'm just looking at them. Is there any here that you wanted to call out while I'm scrolling through?
There have been a number of questions on the digital alarm communicator on the transmitter side, of some recommendations there. And unfortunately, I'm not very familiar with all of the options out there, but just some general comments. For the most detailed information from these connected systems, the first choice should be to look to the manufacturer of the fire alarm control unit, because they will generally have an option that can provide point-by-point information. So that would be the most information that you could receive from that end. But some of the comments have indicated that even a generic dialer that would give alarm, trouble, and supervisory would suffice. So the SureGuard receiver, which is the one that seems to be the most capable, or the one that we would recommend, it's a Johnson Controls product. And if you look at the literature for the SureGuard receiver, you will see a number of compatible transmitters. The one that I mentioned in the comments is the, and I'll have to scroll up to see it, is the TL300 from DSC. So that's a popular dialer. I've heard many technicians mention it and recommend it. So that's one option. But if you're looking for more options, by all means, look at the literature on the digital alarm communicator receiver, and you may find that there are many options available. So yeah, those are good questions, and I'm glad to see so much interest in the DACR feature. It really is a powerful feature that historically has been underutilized.
Fantastic. That's some really good points to call out. Some other things I'm seeing in the stream here that I think are worth talking about generally. First of all, the architecture of the BSIU. We're typically used to TSW mode, because where we have a network, an ESNet or a 4120 network, and the TSW has a server. You sell the TSW server that sits as a node on the network, and then attached to that, you can attach to that clients. And you can have up to 60 clients now in version 602, and you can do mobile clients and so forth. The BSIU is not a client. You don't put in a TSW server on this network. Basically, when you use the BSIU, you just attach the BSIU to the control unit that you're using, and you don't have any other sort of TSW connection at all. So that's the first thing there. It is its own thing, just like the TGA. And that also brings up the other question, which I think, Paul, you might want to throw in on, is can you clarify a little bit more about what the difference between a TGA is and a BSIU? Because now we sort of have three tiers, right? We have actually 4 tiers. We have the TSW server, the TSW client, the TGA, and now the BSIU.
Yeah, and this question comes up a lot because it can get confusing with the different levels of software. So it's important to note that the BSIU is, first of all, available for ESNet only. So it's not an option for an old 4120 network system. So it connects to the ESNet, and even if you have a single node, you would need an ESNet in the fire alarm control panel to form that connection. The important difference between the regular TSW and the BSIU is, of course, the BSIU is more limited in its function and needs to be in the same room as the fire alarm control unit. Now, there's further difference between the BSIU and the TGA, because the TGA is not listed for control. So that's the major difference between the TGA, or the TrueSite Graphic Annunciator, and the Building Systems Information Unit. Is now you have, for a site that places an importance on UL listings, they have a listed means of controlling the fire alarm system. Now, there's even yet another option that often comes up, and that's the TSW software only package. And of course, it's possible to install the TrueSite Workstation on non-listed hardware. But again, that is only going to be acceptable when everyone agrees to take on that liability, because that is not a listed operation. So the BSIU really hits an important, it hits an important sweet spot, you could say, because if listings are important, and of course they typically are in fire alarm systems, that gives us an excellent opportunity to have listed control at a very competitive price with nearly all of the functions possible in the TrueSite software suite. So excellent question, Peter. Because there are so many options, it's important to understand the differences between them.
Yeah, and Alan, I just looked there. He asked the follow-up about a matrix, and I think that actually, now that we're going through this and talking through it, that's a really good idea. I'm sure we could put together a really quick Excel with all the different flavors and some check boxes to help people sort of mix and match. So let's we can put our heads together on that, Paul. I think we can do that quickly.
Yeah, I think that would be an excellent idea.
Yeah. So Agos, hi Agos, how you doing? He's just asking a question, Paul. I don't know if this is you or Roger. Maybe it's a Roger question. Do you have any plans to make the BSIU with multi-client capability? I'm thinking maybe, I was thinking Roger, because the code doesn't allow for clients on this application, does it?
Yes, that's a really good point, Peter. It does not allow for clients with that application, because you have to have a fire alarm unit in the same room as that BSIU.
Yeah.
And actually,
Project
since the
parah. Lumayan banyak itu detek.
And actually, since the BSIU is actually much less expensive and more economical, let's say, than a TSW, you actually could buy multiple BSIUs and put them in the various rooms that you would need to put them in, and bring them back to the ESNet. But no, there would not be an allowance to have clients running off of the BSIU.
And Roger, I'll just add to that. Although I can't comment on specifics, we are always challenging the status quo. So there are ideas that our research and development has brought to the table, and Roger has offered to have discussions with the various code committees to discuss some of our ideas for the future. So we're always looking to shape the codes as well moving forward.
I just since you brought that up, Paul, and not to pat myself on the back, this whole BSIU thing was me and Larry Shudak with UL sitting at a restaurant one night. We drew it out on a paper napkin, talking about how we could create a more economical but yet survivable, reliable offering to the industry. And that's how it got into the code. Larry and I worked on this. UL and I worked on this and got it in there. So to your point, though, Paul, you're exactly right. If there's a new way of doing something that we want to do, just because it doesn't say it in the code today doesn't mean that we don't have the ability to affect the code and change it. Automated testing of our ES appliances is into the code because, frankly, I sat down with AJ Kapowski back umpteen years ago when we were developing that product, and then I went to NFPA and we got it into the code. So if there are applications or things or ways of doing something, Paul is absolutely right. We can work together to influence the code and get them in there.
Yeah, and now it's easy to see why with people like Roger within our organization, why we are one of the first to market with this BSIU product, because it really is a future that we're very invested in, and we're helping to shape the future of the industry.
Excellent. I think too, and just, again, to add my less educated 2 cents in here, but I think also, being part of the company, there's a big recognition, and there has been for a long time. There's a balance, right, between safety and between practicality, like staying on top of the computer and having an 864 listed computer and having to go with computer hardware that literally changes weekly, and prices dropping. The idea of having a UL 864 listed computer is just, in this today's age, is silly, and it's super expensive and super impractical. And but the question is how do you get nimble and being able to use new hardware, and but still maintain that safety? And I think, Roger, there's a good compromise here with that as a first step. But I think long term, you really gotta, I say long term, as an industry, we really have to look at being able to leverage new products faster, new technology faster, because if we have to wait like 4 years for every iPad and everything to come out, the mobile technology and everything, we're going to be in the dark ages.
Right. Well, and so a little peek under the covers, Peter, you just hit on something we're talking to UL about right now as an industry, right? So this isn't just a Simplex thing. Could a BSIU, think about this for a second. Could a BSIU be put on an iPad, and could that iPad be somehow listed to the UL standard, like IBM had that Toughbook a few years ago, where it was a computer that you could drop off of a ladder? Well, could we have an iPad that does the same thing? And UL's question has been, well, how do I know you're in the room? So then we said, well, what if we did telemetry? What if I guaranteed you that I ping the fire alarm panel once every 10 seconds to ensure that I'm within so many feet of it? And UL is actually very intrigued with this idea as far as allowing something like that. So Peter, you're right. And it's also why the advent of Class N for network was added into the code, because people were telling them, FPA, you guys got to do something. We need ways to use off-the-shelf networking communication, voice over IP speakers, and the like. And so Class N was added. And we're at kind of a turning point, I think, with a lot of the codes and where they're going, grasping in the technology.
Right. And I think people, again, this is my opinion, but people are just going to start doing this stuff, and I think they're going to start, they're just not going to wait.
Right.
So that's good. And then I agree, Alan. It would be great, if we could do something like that. So Paul's put up a grid here. This is part of the launch package, is it not, Paul?
Actually, I'm not sure if we've dressed this up to use it as part of the collateral or not, but this was part of a presentation that we did for one of the other regions, and I should have included it in this presentation as well, but here you see a nice matrix that shows which features are possible and which are not. And you can sort of ignore the very last line there. That's a product that we're piloting in another region where we have maintenance agreements to keep the software current. But everything else that you see here, including some very innovative features like the idea of having a combination fire alarm control and building automation systems control from one computer. That was one of the questions, sort of. But really what we can do with the building systems information unit, because we can launch a web application, we can launch an instance of Metasys user interface from the BSIU. So in that way, we're able to allow a person to control both the fire alarm system and the HVAC control system from one PC. So although it's very difficult to have approval to do it the other way around, to control the fire alarm from the building automation system, we can do control of the Metasys system from the BSIU. So then you see the BSIU can do most of the things necessary. And of course, it can't handle a large network. It can't handle clients, so the mobile clients or remote clients at this point. You know, things may change in the code moving forward. And again, the most important thing, line number 4 on here, really sums up everything that it's not allowed to do. Its critical operations cannot rely on the console, cannot rely on the BSIU. So the BSIU is used for redundant control. So it's a supplement to the fire alarm system. It makes it very much easier to use. It makes it very user-friendly and offers some nice features, but it cannot be a critical component for the system to operate. So, yeah, this is a nice chart, Peter, that we may want to work into, you know, a tool for the field.
Yeah, I think so. I think that would be, this will be easy. We'll put some design on it, but I think this is critical. And also, Alan reiterated the, you know, doing a white paper on the DACR, and also, I don't know if we could, if it lends itself to a podcast, we'll have to think about that, Roger. But I think definitely, you know, a white paper and an infographic with DACR with some diagrams would be huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe just how to send communication signals off site and the
Yes.
various ways to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And every
I
team
like
that
that.
every team that we've talked to so far in each region it seems to be, the DACR seems to be, you know, an item that needs clarification.
Yeah, and maybe if it's too narrow of a topic, maybe even reviewing the various options for integrating different manufacturers together within fire alarm, because
Okay.
of course that's not the only option. There's, you know, some options through BACnet and Modbus and things like that.
Right. Okay. I'm not seeing any other questions coming in, and I don't see any hands raised. So I guess we'll give our first call. Yeah, just to see if anyone has anything else to pop it in or to raise their hand. You know, and of course, always if something occurs to you afterwards, or something follows up later by one of your other team members, give us an email. You know, write us a note, check in with your local, you know, local folks, and you know, we'll figure it out, or we'll get an answer back to you.
Right. Well, just a note here, the recording of this webinar will be made available on the Simplex website, so you will also be able to find the relevant product material on the website as well. So for those partners who are new to our website, please go there to sign up for email communications on the distributor support page. So if you have no more questions, once again, I'd like to thank all of you for coming to this webinar, and also thanks to our speakers from the US. You know, we'd like to hopefully meet with you guys someday when you know, we can travel again. Thanks a lot.
Thank you all. Thanks for joining us tonight. And you know, just want to say, since it's been ages, best wishes to you all. I hope you're all safe and happy and healthy.